Hello and welcome to the Light and Energy Show with me, Claire Wiles. Today's show is all about love. And St Augustine said, love is the beauty of the soul. Isn't that absolutely lovely? And I'm joined today by Interfaith Minister Noel Lockyer Stevens. Welcome, Noel, to the show.
Thank you.
And Rhian who is a Crystal Priestess and also spiritual healer. Welcome to the show, Rhian. So if we could start by saying, to you, Noel, what is love?
For me, love is everything. But it's also a bit of a mystery. For lots of people, I think we grow up with love feeling very simple when we're children, and then as we get into our adolescence and we become adults, it becomes terribly complicated. It becomes a great mystery, and we tend to forget the simplicity of love on the inside of ourselves, and we start looking for love on the outside, and then the mystery becomes deeper and deeper and harder to solve.
And Rhian, what does love mean to you?
Well, I think that's true. I totally go with everything that you've said there, Noel. But my view, Claire, as you know, I'm a spiritual teacher, and I often talk to my students and my groups about love because I feel it's absolutely key in self-realisation. So I like to describe love as a mandala. And a mandala is based on a circle, actually. So you've got that interesting concept there of the circle being something that's very whole and complete. But it's a geometric pattern. We start with the circle, and then many shapes based on sacred geometry interconnect to create this absolutely beautiful, usually very brightly coloured and very complete looking shape. And that symbolises the nature of the cosmos. So just taking that one step further, everything in this cosmos is interconnected, and that's what a mandala actually speaks of when we connect with the mandala. So we very much are part of that mandala. We're at the centre of that mandala. Everything in the cosmos is part of the one. We're also part of that one, and love is the glue that holds the mandala together.
How wonderful.
Thank you.
And it's interesting, isn't it, this interconnectedness, because many people feel very isolated and they don't love themselves, which is, I guess, the beginning of everything, is learning to love yourself, isn't it? How would you suggest that people actually started to learn to love themselves?
Shall I go for this one?
Why not?
Okay.
Go for it.
For me, one of the ways of loving ourselves is to be unconditional in our love. Part of the mystery of love is why we chain ourselves so many times to things that we should or shouldn't do, the good and bad things about love. Whereas if we're unconditional in our thinking, we can then start to open our heart to love. And if we spend time perhaps in a quiet way, in a quiet space, considering ourselves, reflecting upon ourselves, perhaps undertaking what many would call the practice of meditation, we start to feel the essence of love within inside ourselves, in that space of quiet, that space of silence, when nothing else around us actually matters. We focus upon ourselves and we discover we are a loving being.
And why do you think people have such difficulty in connecting with themselves and feeling love for themselves? Where do you think it all begins?
Well, Claire, the thing is, we're looking externally constantly. Young people and children start right from the beginning being encouraged to look externally, for example, with the television, with the media, with advertising. We're brought up to think that we are only valued if we have a certain job or certain clothes, or that we're better than other people or have achieved more other people if we achieve a certain have achieved more than other people if we appear to have a certain image. And so all of this distracts people to look externally instead of going into stillness and seeing the true nature of the soul. So that quote that you used at the beginning, love is the beauty of the soul, it really sums up everything that we're talking about here, because as soon as you step into that silent space of stillness and see what the soul truly is, you feel that beauty, that love and that divinity. And I think it's just a matter of distraction, quite frankly.
We're very much within today's society a must-have, and compared to people who haven't got things, or they have got things, and people want the same as somebody else, if not more, don't they? We're very much judged by that. And like you say, it's a distraction with the media and advertising all the time, so that you're not focusing on having the things that you love in your life. Would you agree, Noel?
Yeah, it almost feels like we're running a race to buy the next thing, have the next acquisition, discard that we've got and get something else. And it's all about doing, and there's very little about being. And love is very much about being comfortable with who we are, loving ourselves, coming back to that point, taking the time perhaps to look in the mirror and say, I love what I see. I love who I am, not because of my physical outward appearance, but I know inside I am a loving soul. Coming back to your original quote at the beginning, I am a loving soul, and I am capable of sharing that with other people, unconditionally, not because of who they are or what they've got, purely because I want to share the love I have with the love of another.
And people often think, oh, it would be vain to say that they love themselves, don't they? And this thing of self-worth, I'm not good enough to love myself. So if I'm not good enough to love myself, am I good enough for anybody else to love me?
That's a frightening prospect, really.
It is, isn't it?
Because if you're in that limited mindset of not being good enough, everything you attract will also be inadequate and not good enough, because very much what we are inside creates that magnetism. You know, what we project is what we receive, you know. So it's a frightening prospect to be in that situation whereby you're attracting all these kind of imperfect and substandard and dissatisfying experiences because you yourself feel that you're not good enough. So if anybody is in that position, my advice to them is to find a way to shift out of it and get into a place of self-worth and belonging and connection, so that they can therefore change, you know, the world around them.
And we're being forced to look at things a little bit differently anyway, aren't we? With the current economic climate, people are having to perhaps pull on internal resources that they haven't had to maybe for the last however many years.
Yeah, I think that would be right. If your work and your job and the income from it is everything, and you lose it tomorrow, you may feel you have nothing. Whereas actually, if you know who you are as a being of self-worth, you can lose all of the possessions and still have self-worth and integrity and love.
That lovely quote, the real value of your worth is what you're worth if you lost all your money.
Yes. Yes, people don't remember you because of the car you drive. People remember you because of what you have done for another. And you do that lovingly.
And that kindness, which is something that you've mentioned in your book. You've written a book called The 5-Word Legacy, haven't you? Which encompasses love and kindness. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, the book's designed to be a practical guide to allow us to find love for ourselves, and take it through to living a life of kindness for other people. And it was an idea that came to me when I was out running one day, to string things together, to find a pathway. And the way in which it came to me was that love is on the inside. I know we've already said that, but it truly was me knowing that when I'm in a place just for me, I'm there with that I consider to be my beloved, or the divine, or God, or the essence, the universe, energy, whatever you call it. I'm there in a connection of love. And as that is switched on, I get this feeling of absolute joy. I tingle with it, a bit like the ready bread glow that the little boy had when he made his way off to school. And from those two internal sensations, they're expressed to the world as happiness. Even when the world is not a happy place, and we know that there are many acts of unkindness, acts of disaster that are going on every day, but succumbing to them with sadness or shutting down to them and not feeling them is not the way forward. Countering them with happiness and sharing that with people is the antidote. And it allows then me to look at the world compassionately. So somebody that I know or don't know, somebody that I may like or dislike because of behaviours that they undertake, I still have compassion for that person in their worldly situation. And it then moves me forward to just quite naturally undertaking acts of kindness wherever I am, wherever I go, to people, to animals, to plants, to the planet. It's a sort of step gently philosophy of kindness that's undertaken because I'm in tune with love.
And compassion and love go hand in hand, don't they? Again, with what's on the media, on the news, when you pick up a newspaper, it's a lot of very negative things that are there, particularly if you do switch on the news every night and there'll be somebody that perhaps has been sadly murdered, and it's very hard to feel compassion to the person who has done that deed.
Oh gosh, don't get me started. Compassion, a bit like love, doesn't really come for me on a percentage scale of, well, you're the victim, you can have 80% of my compassion, but you're the perpetrator, I can only give you 20%. It has to be an equal measure. If we're going to be loving beings in this world, we have to understand that compassion goes out in equal amounts to both parties. Otherwise, where's the healing? If you can get 80% healing out of my 80% compassion, you can only heal 20% of what stopped you committing that deed in the first place. You don't have enough compassion given to you to be able to jumpstart your own compassion for the world and not commit such acts again in the future.
How do you feel about that, Rhian?
Well, I think it's a tricky one, but when we switch on the news, when we pick up newspapers, what we're encouraged to do is stand in judgment of all this negativity that we see, and we're encouraged to resonate with all that negativity. So Rhian doesn't read a newspaper and Rhian doesn't watch the news,
No.
I'm afraid, because quite frankly what's being projected from that television screen is a very negative vibration that's not at all in a space of love. Now that doesn't mean I ignore what's going on in the world, and I acknowledge what's going on in the world, and I acknowledge that there are lots of acts going on in this world that come from a very low resonant space, which is basically based on fear. So for me, working in the way that Noel was describing, which is holding a space of love and acting from a space of love, is literally the only way to counteract all these other things that are going on in the world and that really don't feel good to me, at all, and that I don't want. But equally, I'm not going to stand in a space of judgment, because when I move into that space of judgment, I also move into that space of fear. And when I'm in that space of fear, I can't change myself and I can't change the world. So that's my view, and I appreciate it may be difficult for some people to understand exactly where I'm coming from with that, but I feel I would encourage them to actually step into that sense of joy when you feel at one with the divine and working in a space of love, and then I feel they would resonate with where I'm coming from.
I agree, absolutely. And of course, they say that if you read a newspaper that's 2 weeks out of date, it's totally irrelevant anyway. So why read the newspaper and actually have all that negativity taken into you? When you are acting within shining your light of love, if you like, to other people, it's very infectious, isn't it? And helps them to raise their vibration. Sorry, Noel.
Sorry, I was going to say absolutely right. I think happiness is infectious. If you're exhibiting your happiness to the world, happiness attracts happiness. It also attracts unhappiness, because people recognise that you're experiencing something I'm not. How are you achieving that? I want a part of it too. And then when you start explaining to people, well, what I do is I actually let go of some of the value systems of the world, like judgment, right and wrong, good or bad, and try to see things from a different perspective, like a compassionate perspective that encompasses love for all. Some people go, oh, and some people get it and go, how do I do that too?
Yeah, you're right. And quite often I find that clients will come to me, or people turn up at workshops I teach, and they're often in quite a disconnected and unhappy space, and they're there because they're looking to have a piece of the pie, if you like. You know, they're looking for transformation. And often by asking for that transformation, they find themselves walking into a situation that challenges them, with ideas that challenge them, and they're asked to let go of the old paradigm and the old way of resonating and step into that space of love. And you can see an instant change in individuals who come along and start to work intuitively, start to step into feeling, start to open the heart, whether that's through working with the crystals or the crystal skulls, or working with meditation. So yes, you're right, it does sometimes attract unhappiness, but that's because that unhappiness is desperately trying to find a way to be transmuted. And so as a spiritual teacher, or doing the work that you do, Noel, sometimes we come across people, don't we, who are in a very miserable energetic state. And that could be challenging for us, but because we stay in that space of love, we find that we ourselves can deal with it and increase the amount of love that's flowing, because as you step into that space, we resonate together, and all of a sudden, creation takes place.
It's giving people a different view, looking at things differently, isn't it? You mentioned attraction before, and people will often get into the same patterns time and time again, and they need often help to move out of those patterns that they've always followed. And meditation can be a very good way of actually making a start with that, can't it? And not necessarily meditating for an hour every morning, but just taking that time out.
Yeah, I think so. I think meditation is all about finding that place of stillness, whereby you can allow the patterns and the constructs in your life to start to slip away, so that all that's left is the true you. It doesn't have to be an arduous process. Meditation can take place while you're walking in nature, for example. It could take place at home. It could take place in a group. There's lots of ways that meditation can kind of happen for an individual, and it's about the person finding which method of meditation is right for them.
That's best for them. Okay, lovely. And we'll talk more about this after the break. Welcome back. I'm here with Interfaith Minister Noel Lockyer Stevens and Rhian Crystal Priestess, who's also a spiritual teacher, and we're talking about all aspects of love. And we were talking before the break about meditation, and maybe that when we mentioned about self-worth, somebody saying, yes, I am worthy enough to allow myself that time every day, or once a week, or whenever you can, to meditate. Would you think that would be right?
I was thinking about worthiness and the phrase we often hear about "I'm not good enough." And I suspect there are a number of people who will hear what we're saying and say, oh, but I'm not good enough to do that. Or, I used to do something wrong, so I'm not allowed to do that. And we will find many ways of tricking ourselves to not taking the step down some form of pathway towards love, or whether we call it a spiritual path or a religious path or a faith path, it doesn't matter what we call it, we will find a reason for not going down it and staying in the illusion of, but I must do this and I must do that and I must do the other, and this is right and that is wrong, and not taking the steps away from judgment. For me, those are the people that I love to meet the most, because much as it's lovely meeting those that are sharing the same loving happiness in life that I am, the challenge of being a minister, and perhaps yourself as a practitioner as well, is about how to help those people that want it but can't, for whatever reason, take the step. It's almost as if they've got a 1-ton weight around their leg. They can't step forward towards the light. They can't step forward towards love. They won't give themselves the permission. How we manage such people's situations and tell them it's okay. You have permission. Be gentle. Just go for it. knowing that people will actually take it on board and do it.
Yeah, I think actually if you empower a client or someone who comes along to one of your groups by pointing out to them that they actually have choice in how their life is progressing, then they will start to see that they're currently making choices that aren't serving them well, and they could change this and make choices that are absolutely perfect for them. We do put up excuses around ourselves. I'm too busy, I've got too many children, I have to work hard, I must do this, I must do that. All of those kinds of excuses come under the umbrella of expectation and obligation, and those words are very negative because we place these ideas, these notions of expectation and obligation upon ourselves as blocks from reaching freedom.
We use them as a comfort sometimes, don't we?
We do, and the soul, I believe the nature of the soul is that it yearns to be free, it wants to be free, and it wants to reach as high as it can. It wants to go for enlightenment. There's some kind of inextricable spark within that wants to reach for this loving state that you've talked about in your book, and that I talk about a lot in my work. And so when there's a disresonance within a person because they have placed themselves in a state of obligation or expectation that's all linked in with that low self-esteem and low self-worth, then that disresonance will cause the unhappiness that brings them to my therapy or your group or my workshop, and that they need to step out of that by making the choice to do so.
And oftentimes people will know, won't they? They'll intuitively know that they should be making change, or the way they would like to go. It's having the skills or the information or the help to move to that next step.
Yes.
Because our intuition never serves us wrong, does it? It may affect other people, but that's their path in life to deal with, not ours. We should always be listening to our inner voice.
Yes. It's about the heart though, Claire, and I think the answer to all of this is very simple. If each and every person was to listen to the heart and listen to what the heart's telling them, then they would be making steps in the right direction. There's a lot of people out there who have shut their hearts down with protections and barriers and all these things we've been talking about, all these negative resonances, and it's a case of them saying, right, no, now I need to open my heart and I need to step forward into the world a free being, and I need to follow my path. So much work can be done through meditation, but also through working with the crystals, through working with other forms of energy, and just through seeing and perceiving the truth of what is out there, instead of holding on to the negative illusion that actually keeps us small. Seeing that we're limitless beings is a heart-opening activity.
And you've brought with you a wonderful crystal skull. How would you work with the crystal skulls to help somebody to create more love for themselves?
Yeah, well, what I've brought today, Claire, is a rose quartz crystal skull.
Very
rose quartz
it
is gorgeous. It's got that pink vibration of the heart, and it's all about those soothing energies there that are associated with love and nurturing. And for me, when a crystal is carved into the form of a skull, there's a kind of a statement being made about consciousness. People that work with the crystal skulls are often working on a very deep level to transform their own consciousness and to understand the nature of consciousness, not just of themselves, but of the whole, of the oneness and of humanity as well. So for me, the skull is that kind of symbol, if you like, of awakened consciousness. So I feel that working with the skulls, either energetically, during healing sessions, during meditation, or just connecting in with the form of the skull, will connect you with a sense of awakened consciousness that you can use for that transformation we're talking about. It's interesting because other people who work with the skulls also come to this conclusion that love is the key. It really is the buzzword in this whole world of crystal skulls at the moment. So it's interesting how they're kind of, connecting in.
It is, isn't it? The vibration of crystals and crystal skulls, but also the vibration of sound is very key, isn't it? People perhaps will use music to create a loving atmosphere perhaps in their home, or certain music would make them feel quite the opposite. Do you have any sorts of types of music that you use particularly?
For me personally, if I'm truly going within, I prefer just to use silence, because it's such a rarity in my day and the day of many other people. The day starts with an alarm and perhaps finishes with the television and all the intervening noise in between. If I am going to listen to some form of soundtrack, it usually is something that stimulates an inner vibration. And that may be a particular voice that I'm used to. It might be the plucking of a particular chord or a note on a piano. And it does, just as you've described, give that sense of, okay, I'm here now. Now's the time to do my inner work. And again, it's sometimes the sound of a chime might be the beginning of a session and the end of a session for me. So there's a permission. The space in between the two chimes is the permission to be me. So taking myself out of the usual world into a new world and back out again, and use a chime or some other note to achieve it.
And how about you?
For me, sound has a number of aspects to it that are really quite interesting. Firstly, it's about vibration, it's about resonance. So, for example, if a person is in that awakened, conscious state of love that we have been talking about, then when they speak, they are actually projecting a loving resonance in the voice. Now, of course, that will make a difference to what happens to them when they go out there and live their lives, because they're communicating in a loving way with everybody around them, be that the person in the garage when they're buying their petrol, or indeed their partner or a family member or a child, even an animal. That loving vibration and that loving resonance will be projected, and it's absolutely key. So I think sound is important on that level, but when we're talking about music, once again, we're talking about resonance. So it's important to select music that is highly resonant with the love vibration. And as you know, because I know you're interested, Claire, in sound healing, those of us who work with sound energetically will be very aware that sound interacts with the human aura and the human energy system, and it will either resonate nicely with that and create a healing or a positive, loving benefit, or sound can be very disresonant. So we have to select very carefully what it is that we listen to. I've recently bought a monochord chair for sound healing. It's a beautiful chair that a person will sit in, and then I will actually play the strings of the chair, which are a monochord that runs all the way down the spine of the person. And we've tuned that chair to F, or slightly sharp, because F is the heart vibration. And of course, this kind of a healing will open the heart, allow the person to access much more loving energy, and it will resonate right the way through the body and clear that central channel.
It's interesting, isn't it? When I know when I first found out about Masaru Emoto's work many years ago with charging water with the use of sound and word and music, and the frozen water molecule would change shape. And as we're 75-80% water ourselves, that cannot fail to have an effect on us, can it?
Yes.
And I mean, I know that you've got children as well, and perhaps some of the music that your teenage children may listen to may negatively affect you. And you're right in saying, you choose what, again, intuitively feels right for you and balances your body. And sorry.
I was just going to say though, if you listen to the words of a lot of the music that you'll hear in the pop and rock charts, often these songs are about love, but they're about other things as well. They're about unrequited love, they're about disappointment, they're about cheating, they're about someone who's lost love, for example. And there seems to be in those kinds of songs a sort of a feeding of the I'm not good enough
Absolutely.
sort of state of mind. And so it's not just about the resonance of the music, it's about the deep resonance in the words and the intent behind the words as well.
It is. It's being your own best friend, isn't it?
Yes.
It's treating yourself as you would treat your best friend.
Yes.
You wouldn't criticise your best friend, but we're very good at criticising ourselves.
Yeah.
So it's having that kindness and looking in the mirror and actually being kind to yourself instead of criticising yourself, isn't it?
Claire, I think if you look at just the three words, I love you, and you think very deeply about what that truly means, if you can see that we are all one, when I say to you, I love you, what I'm actually saying to you is that I love myself because I see myself in you. Do you see where I'm coming from?
I do.
And if people can step into that sort of feeling, then the words I love you take on a beautiful meaning that is positive and that energetically creates I would say a positive, if you're feeding something positive there,
Yes.
rather than I love you with the hope that I'm telling you I love you because I want you to tell me you love me back, So think very carefully. That's the kind of message I like to give to people. Think very carefully about what you're saying, how you're saying it, and where the intent is behind your words. It's
Yes.
powerful stuff.
It is very powerful stuff. So after the break, we'll come back to have a chat about moving into 2012, how people can create more love in their lives, because there is a big shift happening, isn't there? It's been going on for several years and people are awakening more, and we're going to look at love from 2012 and beyond. So join us after the break. Hello and welcome back. I'm joined today by Noel Lockyer Stevens, interfaith minister, and Rhian, who's a crystal priestess and spiritual teacher. And we're talking about all aspects of love. And before the break, we were discussing a little bit about 2012, weren't we? And the changes that are happening in the world, which may be related to love or even lack of love. How do you feel about that, Noel?
It feels at this moment that there are two things happening at the same time. We talk about 2012 being this energetic shift, this opportunity as a species to step forward and become a more spiritual being, coming from our heart, trusting our intuition, sharing that essence with other people. By the same token, there seems to be this machine going on that is pumping out the materialist illusion of we must have this, we must listen to such and such, we must spray our body with whatever body spray it is in order to attract love from the outside. And so it's the opposing opposite of what's going on in terms of come from the inside with self-love and awareness of who you are, share it with another spiritual being on this physical planet, versus get this car, get this aftershave, go out and get this girl or guy or whatever it is and live happily ever after, and finding out that we don't.
And how do you feel about that, Rhian?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think he's quite right, Noel's quite right. There are two sides to this. On the one side, we are saying that we want to walk forward as beings on this planet with a better environment to live in, a better future for our children and our children's children, and we want to become fully awakened and conscious of who we are, what we are, and how we can move forward, what we're here to do. But then on the other hand, we are still bombarded with messages of, well, you won't receive love unless you are physically perfect, unless you have a packed bank account, unless you have this job, unless you drive this car. And there is a disresonance once again within society in terms of what it is that's happening. Now, I believe that the push is going to be for a fully awakened consciousness, and that somehow things have to achieve a balance. That's going to mean certain things crumbling and literally fading away, and it's going to mean a change in mindset and perception for many, many people. So they will start to seek spiritually much more openly. And of course, will start to really be looking for love in terms of those twin flames and those soulmate connections that they want, because it's when you enter into that connected relationship with another person that you find together you can actually achieve and enhance the experience of awakened consciousness.
So you mentioned the words twin flame. Could you explain a little bit more about that?
Well, there are many theories about twin flames, and I don't like to be too technical about it, but it's an expression that I use to explain a connection that one person has with another person, whereby there is a complete and total resonance. Now, there are ideas about the soul, when the two people have incarnated into physical bodies, the soul came from the same aspect of divine source, and that soul has actually split into two. It's a bit like two people carrying one soul. But another way of looking at it that I think is much easier to get one's head around is to say that there are two beings who are resonating at the same rate, and that are actually two halves of a whole, two pieces of the pie that fit together nicely. And it's a kind of divine perfection in coupling. So that's what a twin flame is for me. And of course there are soulmates as well who also share resonance with each other, but they're very much teachers to one another. So the relationships are not always permanent. They can be permanent relationships, but often they are relationships of deep learning. And it will often be on a karmic level that those two soulmates need to come together for a reconnection. Perhaps they have been together in past lives, past parallel existences, but there needs to be that reconnection for the journey of each person. A twin flame is different because it's a bit like the ultimate. Two halves of the whole come together and completion takes place. Right. It's happening now, Claire, in 2012, even more. It was happening last year in 2011 hugely, and now in 2012 it's happening more and more, because of course we are entering a time of completion when we're ready on this planet to enter into a new cycle and a new age, literally, which is based on love.
It's interesting, isn't it, how many people are perhaps splitting up with their partners, getting divorced, looking for something else, something better, not putting up with old patterns, old behaviours, and feeling that actually they do want to have more of a loving relationship, more of the things that they want, the perfection within their home life that they didn't have previously. We can see that, can't we, by the amount of dating adverts that come on the television. And we've talked about actually becoming whole and your own self-worth. And is that important before you can share yourself with somebody else?
For me, I think it's one of the most crucial aspects of if we are not at one with ourselves, how do we go out and have the twin flame, I'm trying to say that again, the twin flame relationship with another? Because it suggests that there's a discord, that I'm not complete within myself, so I must go and find someone who can complete me, which becomes a part of the illusion again, which makes a great dating game of find your other half in somebody else. Whereas you spoke about the mandala earlier on, where all the parts of the mandala are then greater than the sum of the parts. So if we're already fulfilled and complete, because we've done the going in, we've done the spiritual work, we've worked out how wonderful we are without aftershave, perfume, and goodness knows what else we slap on ourselves, when we meet somebody else, it becomes more than the sum of the parts. So two people actually create a loving relationship, not only for themselves but for the world, that is greater than the two parts within it. Otherwise, it's a predatory game of finding someone who's going to stop you feeling lonely at night. And that's, for me, is not the purpose of divine relationship.
Yes, it's totally unnecessary to do that. I mean, one of the ways I would express this is to say, for individuals to enter into a loving relationship with their reality. That's something I've said before, and I'm going to say it again, because once everything around them vibrates and resonates love, they will attract in the perfect divine love for them. And for me, that's exactly what you were saying, Noel, that is that divine relationship connection connection. And the reason it's greater than the sum of its parts is because the relationship is yourself whole, the other person whole, and together what you do is you raise the energy and you reach up for the divine, and that's the bit that's greater. You start to see the interconnectedness, you start to feel part of the cosmos. It's basically living Tantra.
And as we move into 2012 and people are awakening more to their spiritual side, are there any messages that you have for people? Because I find a lot of people are very fearful of 2012. They've heard these things about the Mayan prophecy and it's the end of the world, and maybe they've only got this short space of time to find love, so it has to be done in a great hurry before it's too late.
Yeah, we all have different belief systems. As an interfaith minister, I work with people of different religions, different faiths, and some of none at all. People say, well, I just believe in nothing. And that's absolutely fine. Rather than rushing to try and find a belief pattern that fits, some of it's about going back to the heart, living intuitively, and just stepping forward into the moment, seeing what happens in that moment, live it to the full, live it lovingly, and be happy. 2012, be happy.
Be happy, perfect.
Yeah. We're the creators of our own future, Claire. We've got a blank slate there in front of us, and as soon as we find ourselves in that space of awakened consciousness and seeing the truth of what love really is, then we can start to create a very, very loving future for ourselves, for the others around us, and for the planet. So if you're asking about 2012, I think that in fact what we need to see is that we are eternal, and of course there can be no end to the world if we are eternal. Love is the key in seeing that, and it doesn't need to be a hard journey. This is something that you can realise in an instant, and it's like there's a light bulb moment, there's a big flash, everything around you changes. And I think that that's what 2012 is all about, and that's what the consciousness shift is all about. So I would just ask people to open to that, and I would hope that their light bulbs will switch on sooner rather than later.
So it would be this 100 monkey syndrome, wherein if enough of us generate and resonate with that love and project that love, that will then have a knock-on effect to everybody around the world and to the planet in general, and as you say, to the cosmos.
Yeah, well, as I say, we create our own realities. So if we all focus on doing exactly what Noel said, stepping into that space of compassion and interconnectedness, so that every act that we carry out is an act of love and kindness, then actually we're all doing our part, and we are all settled into our little place within that mandala, and everything becomes perfect.
It's going back to that law of attraction that you spoke about very much earlier, isn't it?
Yes.
Giving out what you believe. I think it was Gandhi that said, as human beings, our power lies not into how to remake the world, but into remaking ourselves.
Yes.
And by remaking ourselves, that will in turn remake the world.
Yes, absolutely.
I was thinking of your light bulb moments, and I think one of the myths that we carry with us is that love can be turned on and turned off. So I need to be in a relationship, meet somebody, and after a certain period of time, when we've done a few certain key things together, love will happen, so I can turn the button on. I can turn the switch on. And when that person does something I perhaps don't like, I can turn it off again. While we take such conditions into our relationships, we won't make the energetic shift. It's not going to happen. For me, the aspect is everything, everyone I view, I love. Because there's no condition. I don't need to know the story. I don't need to know whether the person's done good or bad, right or wrong. I don't need to set up a judgment framework. I just need to love all that I view. And sometimes that's doing that compassionately, because the behaviours that someone may demonstrate may be awful. Absolutely terrible. You think, gosh, how can anybody possibly love you when you do that? Well, hold up the mirror, guys. We've all done things that we regret and that we don't like about ourselves. keeping the love going all the time for ourselves and another as a constant is an energetic shift. If we use 2012 as the opportunity to do what we could have done in 2011 and 2010 and before, and could do in 2013, and just say, no, I'll do it now. Right now, just turn love on and keep it going. And when the first person cuts you up in the car or jumps in front of you in the queue or says a word you don't like to you or whatever, you carry on loving. All the great teachers have said it. There's nothing mystical or magical in the statement. The physically doing it on a day-by-day basis, that's what we need to do.
Yes.
And wouldn't that be an amazing world if it was like that?
Well, I think love is enlightenment, Claire. That's a very sweeping, quite simple statement, but that is how it feels to me. And once you are in that space, there isn't any switch to turn that light bulb off, because it's beautiful, it's addictive, it's compelling, and it's totally eternal. So, the relationships you're in don't come into question. The reality that you create around you is only improving, rather than on some kind of a roller coaster, or in some kind of situation where you feel you might lose what you have. It's just eternal, it's everlasting, it's fabulous.
That's the fear thing again coming in, isn't it? If it's complicated, it's not love.
Absolutely. So on that note, thank you both, Rhian and Noel, so much for joining us. It's been absolutely fascinating. A very lovely afternoon. And so, in Love, Light and Energy, from me, Claire Wiles, thank you so much for joining us. Visit us on Facebook and also visit our website at www.thelightsandenergychannel.tv. And I look forward to seeing you soon. Goodbye.